Welcome everyone to the Go Big with Leanne show. And I'm so excited for the guest that I have tonight because I just love and I truly believe in empowerment through connection. And so my idea behind the show is to introduce the audience to people and places and things and ideas that maybe they've never been exposed to. And when I met Amy through a friend, we've never physically met, so it's all been on Facebook. And the friend that introduced me, I haven't met her either, but I could just when Jan was telling me about Amy, I'm like, yeah, I have to have her on my show. And I've read about her and just kind of followed her on Facebook. And I have a personal passion for yoga myself. I started my practice, I want to say 10 years ago or so, but I've had some really important things that happened in yoga practice, and I'll share those throughout the show, things that are very near and dear to my heart. So, but without further ado, I want to turn it over to Amy and let her introduce herself and tell us a little about her. She's an amazing person with a whole list of accomplishments. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of those tonight, her pre-launch of her book, but more importantly, how yoga can really help people in this time of transition and the time of struggle and mental health and all that we have going on in the world. So Amy, please introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm known mostly as the author of Yoga for Depression, which was published. It was the first book that was published on yoga and mental health. And after that, the W.W. Norton asked me to write something for professionals, Yoga Skills for Therapists. And but my journey, I wouldn't have written a book called Yoga for Depression if I hadn't suffered from depression myself. And really years of antidepressants and psychotherapy. And the psychotherapy, I think, was very important for understanding and managing my life and, working through some early childhood traumas. But it really wasn't until I began a yoga practice that my actual mood began to lift. And I remember I talk about this at the beginning of Yoga for Depression, but I had a psychiatrist I was seeing who was also prescribing medication for me. And I'd probably been seeing her for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years. So there was a real transference. I mean, it was a relationship. I saw her every week. And when I started feeling better after beginning a daily yoga practice back in the late 80s, and I said, I'm not sure I need to be on the medication anymore. And she saw me as someone she'd finally stabilized on medication. So, she said I was one of those people who would always have empty pockets. And it felt like my pockets were full,
yeah.
and it was like, I remember, I talk about this. I was riding across the Newport Bridge, driving actually,
Right.
listening to Jean Houston, a psychologist who I have great admiration for, talking. She was leading a workshop, and it was like it was before CDs. It was like an audio tape.
Right.
She was leading a workshop in California and people were naming themselves. And they named themselves. I closed my eyes sort of as I was driving, and the name that bubbled up was Abundance. I was like, wait a minute, I'm one of those people with empty pockets, and I'm feeling abundant. So reluctantly, I did terminate with her and saw a friend's psychiatrist. And after 2 months or so, he said, I don't see you as a candidate for this medication. And he slowly titrated me off that medication, very slowly. And that was in 1989, and I haven't been on medication since. And I became passionate then about learning more about how yoga worked. I collaborated with researchers, wrote a kind of a big article, the first article for a yoga journal called Yoga, the Natural Prozac, in, I guess it was 99, I think it was the first article. So I became passionate about sharing what had really literally saved my life with others. And I know you've said that you have had experiences. I think one of the first things I do when I am with people, either on Zoom these days, online trainings or workshops on site, is how many people have cried on their yoga mat. Well, first I say, how many people practice yoga? Yeah.
Right.
And then I say, put your hand down if you've never cried on the yoga mat. And it's a natural occurrence. It's a
Right.
release. It's not about a story. It's about letting go of what's constricting us in the physical body, the emotional body. There may not be words. It's a
Right.
natural flow. So did you want to say something about that? Because I know
Yeah.
you've had experiences. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's a lot of people believe that yoga is for very fit people and limber people. And so, for me, I'm stiff as a board. When I actually learned yoga from this book that was probably written in the 60s, 28-day plan to yoga. You're probably familiar. I can't remember the author, but I learned it page
Richard
by page.
Hiddleman. It's
Yes.
Richard Hiddleman. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I learned it at home. And
Yeah.
and then I went to the yoga studio, and I think my first class, I was crying, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? Because I'm like the military girl, strong, independent. And I'm like, why am I crying? But two things happened to me in yoga that I want to share before we go into a little bit further in conversation. One, I fell in love with my body. I'm horrible at the name of the poses. I think it's the plow, when you lay on your shoulders and you put your feet behind your head, and all your belly is scrunched up. And really, it's not a pretty position, but I just started bawling, and I had this overwhelming love for my body. So that was a huge experience for me, and I just embraced it. And the other, lots of beautiful stories, but that one. And then I went to yoga class, and in Shavasana, at the end of the class, I had this really strong vision about Jesus was holding, I was a softball player. So Jesus had his arms wrapped around me, and we were holding the bat together, and we swung, and he said to me, it's now your time to use your voice. And I went home that night, and I had this overwhelming voice saying, you need to call your dad. You need to call your dad. I called my dad. He didn't sound well. He passed away that night. And I know that vision actually was probably more of my dad passing, because I was my dad's bat girl during softball. And so I thought in the vision that it was Jesus, but after that, I was like, no, that was my dad saying he's passing basically the family torch, the voice onto me. And so, yoga holds a very special place in my heart, but also for mental health, because I have a degree in psychology, and I, worked in the behavioral health field. And I just know it can have so much power, not only for myself, because I've had a pretty stressful time the last 12 years with, some family experiences. And I always say, I kind of do yoga for the safety of others. to keep myself, in check, in tune. And so it's a really powerful practice, not only for, physical health, but, the mental health. So, I'm just so grateful for people like yourself that have taken it on to go into the healthcare facilities and to train people in the mental, especially in the mental health field, that there can be other options. Maybe you do medication and yoga, but maybe like yourself, you can just turn to yoga for complete healing.
It's different for everyone.
Right.
And I always say, especially when I'm teaching a large group, don't go home. You're going to feel brighter and lighter and better because you've released so much on the yoga mat this weekend. Don't go home and flush your meds down the toilet.
Right.
You have to slowly titrate. And many of us can actually withdraw from the medication, but I think it really takes supervision and care, and doing it very slowly. It's not something that you can just go cold turkey with. And some people will always take a little bit of medication. If that's you, I say, less it. It's what's bringing you to the yoga mat. If that's, it's bringing you to an ability to take care of yourself and to love yourself and to have experiences like you described on the yoga mat. I too have had a catharsis, a kind of letting go in that pose. And most of what we teach in LifeForce yoga, which is the kind of yoga that I've that I developed out of study with many masters that's specifically for mental health is accessible to everybody. So for example, a yogic breath like Anuloma and Viloma Krama, we call stair step, because there's so many people who've said to me as a yoga teacher for years, well, I like the yoga stretching, but I don't like all that breathing. And that's because they can't do it. The first thing that yoga class does often is to watch the breath, to do yogic 3-part breath. And if someone's an upper chest breather, often they're tamping down a lot of material. So 2 things can happen. One is they don't get it. They can't breathe deeply. So they right away feel not good enough. So there are ways in which we can offer practices like stair step breath that everybody can do. And it helps deepen the breath slowly without the expectation that you're going to breathe down to the bottom of the lungs, which some people can't, and for good reason. Some people, because of what they're going through, they're tamping down a lot of emotion, the diaphragm is tight, they're breathing from their upper chest. And so the other thing that can happen is that emotional flooding. The moment we start breathing deeply, and there may not be words with it, it's just a release, it's a letting go. And so that's why I teach yoga teachers to depathologize, to just, allow, I always say at the beginning of any class, crying is one of the highest spiritual practices. One who knows crying knows yoga. So that people feel comfortable and at ease and not and I've taught classes with tears rolling down my face.
Right.
So
beautiful.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, for myself, and I know a lot of my friends and just in general, I think people are afraid of emotions and they're afraid of feeling because that's like letting go of the control.
Exactly.
and we don't know what's going to happen, but I can, from my personal experience, my life is so much more fulfilling and peaceful now that I have allowed myself to feel those feelings and embrace them and stop judging them and just let things flow. Because we are emotional beings. I'm a weight loss coach and people always say, well, I'm an emotional eater. I said, well, we all are. We all have emotions and we all eat, and to some degree, there may be a little more disordered eating with the emotions. But I want people to understand that emotions are normal and healthy, and they're meant to be processed. And but if we keep stuffing them down, that's when trouble starts. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And people come sometimes I do a lot of workshops that are called LifeForce yoga to manage your mood or, to beat the blues, that sort of thing. So they may be expecting that it's all going to be, happy, joy.
Yeah, right.
And I always start by saying the only way out is through. By the time this workshop is over on Sunday, you're going to feel brighter and lighter, but there may be tears along the way. There may be a letting go and giving people permission for that. We do things that are really simple. We do the postures as well, but we have mudras and mantras and pranayama breathing that we that we rename so that it's not, so that it can be used in all sorts of religious settings. So, for example, if I'm teaching, I've taught, I remember teaching in Georgia, the medical center there, and a nurse came up to me afterwards, and she's was her Christianity was really important to her, and she said, I felt when we did that I was making more room for Jesus Christ, for Christ to come through. And I think whether we're teaching, so we want to meet people where they are, not impose some other kind of Hinduism or any kind of cosmology that isn't comfortable for them. We want to make sure that it meets them where they are, not only in terms of their physical bodies and adapting, adjusting, accommodating, but also in terms of their belief system. So So, my daughter is an Orthodox Jew, so I've taught, Orthodox Jews, and it's making room for Hashem to flow through.
Right.
It's clearing the space. What we do is we clear the space, we remove the obstructions. So whatever, that our connection to the divine, however we know that connection, feels more more real. There's more
Right.
room, and there's more room for the sense of our own sense of authenticity. So
Right.
every morning, I do my poses, I meditate, and I jump on a bike, and at the top of the mountain, when I've ridden up the mountain, I'll, do some standing poses, and, it's a flow, and my practice changes. I don't know if you do the same practice every day, Leanne, or whether it changes with the weather and my spirit, how I feel.
Yeah. And there's no right or wrong. I'll do random poses in my office to kind of center myself. And I think you said that beautifully. I mean, meeting people where they're at, being that bridge. And for me, it's making room for love. And so the more love that I can flow in, or we can flow in as a society, the more love we can give out.
Yeah.
So making room for that love.
Absolutely. It's I love, I quote Susan Salzberg, who's a Buddhist teacher, who asked a psychiatrist at a cocktail party, what do you think is the most healing aspect of what you do? And he thought for a moment, and he said, I would have to say it's the love in the room. And research actually supports that, no matter what the modality of psychotherapy, it's really the relationship that makes the difference between, in terms of an outcome, especially for dealing with mood disorders.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, relationships in general in life, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
We're here, I mean, in my opinion, we're here for each other to show that compassion and love, and to be there and be that bridge. We're all in this together. And so I can't imagine, I can't wait for your book to come out, because I mean, obviously you've had some really great life experiences and some great training, the science behind it. But, how did the book itself kind of come about?
You're talking about the new book, the
novel? The new book. Yeah, the novel.
Okay.
The Temple Dancer, right?
Yeah, right. So every book has come from my passion, so Yoga for Depression came from my passion for yoga as a healing modality. And so Temple Dancer has been with me in part for more than 25 years. In one of my trips to India in the early 90s, I had a couple of experiences that stayed with me, that moved me, that brought me to tears, that were off the yoga mat entirely. Right. One of them was in the office of a woman who is an Indian woman, academic, a feminist, and also a novelist. And she was showing me a calendar that she'd put together with a group of women of Karnataka and beedi rollers, poor women in Karnataka. And in that calendar was a picture of Rohini, 8-year-old Rohini, who was being dedicated to the goddess Yalama. And what that meant was essentially ritual prostitution at that point. And it was the calendar was from 1985. And it was a way for families to earn money. And I had another experience. I won't go into detail of that, but when I came home from India, I became passionate about understanding this tradition from which the temple dancers came from. So it was banned in 1947, temple dancers, after 1,500 years of sacred training. And what we know of classical Indian dance now, Bharatanatyam, which is it requires extreme amounts of dedication and training, is what temple dancing was, only it's a sanitized version. So temple dancers were auspicious women. They tied the tali around the neck of the bride in India. They led processions. They put the deities to bed, and they, at night in the temples, they had a role in the temple. And they were also sort of like geisha. They were often the consort of the temple priest or the maharaja. So they were trained, they were well educated, they had gold, they had land and animals because their patrons would give them things, so they had more power than most women in India. And one of the first things that the parliament of actually at that time that the Indian parliament did was to ban temple dancing. So these women were thrown out on the street. So this little girl, Rohini, was dedicated to the goddess Yalama, not as a temple dancer, but as a prostitute. And I became passionate about knowing more. I went to Wesleyan University, the largest, to explore their library and meet with people, largest collection of world music, and met with a woman who'd studied with one of the most famous, Bala Saraswati, who was teaching at Wesleyan at the time. And this voice of this 8-year-old beady roller in 1937, who becomes a real temple dancer before the ban, just started flowing through me. And it was like taking dictation. It was downloaded. And wow. I had a training. I started a training business for mental health professionals and yoga teachers that supported mental health through yoga, called LifeForce Yoga Practitioner Training. And I sold that training to Rose Kress, who was my senior student about 5 years ago, to give me. I still teach in it, and I still teach, but I no longer have the administrative responsibilities of running an institute. And that gave me time to go back to fiction, because I'd been a depressed fiction writer with an MFA and fiction, and I'd been a depressed fiction writer, and so I had some short stories published and won some awards, but my novels had never been published. So I wrote An American Frame in 2016 that's partly set in Yogaville, and then it goes back to 1997. So there are two stories really evolving. The diary of this temple dancer that Wendy receives on a train. So it's sort of everything I've explored from the standpoint of non-dual philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, and it's also a romance. There's also a lot of passion in it, both spiritually and of the flesh. And there's betrayal. It's kind of a suspenseful novel from both stories as they progress. It also explores mother-daughter relationship, because that's always a big one for me.
Yes.
So it's in pre-release, which means you can pre-order it. And I hope folks will, because what that does is after people pre-order, then it gets, thank you. I see it right there. When people pre-order it, then apparently it ups your Amazon ranking when you actually do launch the book. And the book I have here is an ARC. It's an advanced reader's copy. So it goes out to bloggers and reviewers to maybe hopefully get a little press before it's released. Actually, it's gotten some very good reviews from people who've read it, and some advanced praise. But you can read actually an excerpt of it. There's an excerpt about the first 30 pages is on the website, yoga for amyweintraub.com. And I also, in terms of going back to some of the yoga practices, since we've been sheltering at home for the most part, I've been doing free practices of between 5 and 15 minutes every week or so. It's called Remote Relief, and you could probably sign up for that on my website, I think, but also on my YouTube channel.
Right.
It's just Amy Weintraub, I think, is the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's a whole series that I've been doing that are just, for soothing, calming, energizing when needed, just being kind to ourselves, having more compassion. So they're short breathing and some mantra practices. But the mantras that we use are not tied to deities. So we're not, chanting in satsang as we would with Krishna Das. And I love that, but that's not what we're doing. We're doing seed sounds from one of the oldest languages, which is Sanskrit. But they're the Sanskrit's the base for the basic Urdu and European languages. So it's very familiar tones that we use, and they're tones that are energizing for the system, and there are tones that are calming for the system. And we combine that with mudras that are energizing, mudras that are calming, and also with imagery and people's own imagery, not like imagery that is like I wouldn't tell anyone to see a beautiful ocean wave.
Right.
I might say, think of something in nature that really supports your ease and well-being. Is there a place in nature or a time you felt at ease? Or perhaps it's a face or a beloved, a deity that gives you that sense of ease. And so I would never, I want to empower people with their own imagery. So we'll combine those images with mantra and with gesture that are either empowering, and we call that Brahmana practices, or Langana practices that are calming and soothing.
Yeah, and I've checked out your YouTube channel, and it's brilliant. So it's a great place to go. A lot of people have had to find different ways to do their yoga practice because you're used to going to a studio and having that community feel, and now we have to shift a little bit. But I just love how people have been so creative to still how to give their gifts to the community, in a new format that most of us are pretty uncomfortable with, but still offer that to folks. And, for myself and probably a lot of other folks, when we need it the most is when we least want to do it. So just know that that's a universal feeling, that if you're really wound up or stressed or having anxiety about something, it can be a little challenging to go practice the breathing. But just, I always tell myself, Leanne, go do it. And then I feel better afterwards. But I'm kicking and screaming and dragging like a little 2-year-old.
Yeah, I totally agree. Two things occur to me. One is that to have a tool, and whether it's my CD or somebody else's, or downloadable material, or going online or whatever, having it when you have those moments of like, oh, I can't get out of bed, or I don't feel like it, and we all do, to plug in with your earbuds, somebody else's voice, or something on video, something on the internet that gets you going. I know I used to take home CDs and DVDs from Kripalu, and every once in a while I wouldn't feel like practicing. I'd pop in somebody else's in the VCR back in the day. I'd pop someone else's video in, and I'd practice with them for about 5 minutes, and then I'd turn it off and do my own practice, but use those tools. The other thing I would say is that if you're feeling really lethargic, there's so many things you can do. You can start in bed with something like stair step breath. You can do that seated or lying down. you can start by stretching in bed,
Right.
you know, doing, but I can, if you like, I think stair step is really good because it meets both anxiety and depression. So if someone's not able to breathe down, it helps them deepen the breath,
Hmm.
and it meets that upper chest breathing. But it also, there are several steps to it. It also has a mild, what we call a kriya, which is a mild, appropriate in clinical settings. Belly pumping, very mild, not like some of the breath of fire,
Right.
Kapalabhati or Nali, some of the more that are really fiery and not appropriate for everyone at all times. But something like stair step, and if you'd like, you can do this in bed before you even get out of bed, or you can do it sitting in a chair like we are right now. Do you want to do a little stair step,
Yeah,
Leanne?
let's do it. Let's
Okay.
go for it.
Okay. So we're going to just allow the eyes to close or not. And we're going to, through the nostrils, we're going to be stepping as though we're stepping up a mountain. So we'll do it together. And when you get to the top of the mountain at your own pace, see something beautiful and then slide down the mountain through the nostrils. And again, as though you're climbing a mountain, you can see something beautiful on the way up. And when you get to the top, look out, beauty, and slide down the mountain. And this time, why don't we take a glass elevator up the mountain? A long glide up. Step out of the elevator, see something that lights you up inside, and little steps down through the nostrils. Notice what's happening in the belly. And again, a long ride up. Step out, see something beautiful, and little steps down. Nice. And let's do little steps up again. At your own pace. When you get to the top, see something beautiful, and this time little steps down. Beautiful. And last time, little steps up. And when you get to the top, look out. Here you are. Here I am, ready. And slide down the mountain. And allow your own natural breath to find you again. Welcome the breath wherever it's landing. And as you're ready, you can allow your eyes to flutter open if they've been closed. I was tempted to go on and on and on and lead us through a centering. And it's like, okay, stop. But so, yeah, so what that does is that the little steps up meets that sort of upper chest breath and begins to slow it down. You know, we fill up and then we let it go. We use our own imagery. And then when we got to the part 3, which I just did one round of, which was the little steps up and little steps down, that's so good for depression, because what you're doing is the solar plexus is yogically, this is the Manipur Chakra, the 3rd chakra, the self-esteem, power, identity. Often when we're depressed, there's kind of the posture of depression, a little slump, and there's just not enough energy. happening here. Diabetes too, also, so we want to invigorate this area, but we don't want to overly stimulate it. So because many of us have an anxiety-based depression. So we want to clear that area. So we little gentle belly pumping. That particular practice, many psychotherapists use in their practice who've learned it for, the LifeForce yoga practitioner training. And they also use mantra and mudra and, little things that can just have a paradigm shift in the mood.
Yeah, so beautiful and so simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that you have to go to the gym for or go. I mean, you can do it, even if it's just a little bit of the stair step breathing. But for me, stretching, is just, it is so healing. And most of us, we don't even stretch. And we, as kids, we did. And so it's beautiful. And I just love that, we can keep it simple and we can give these beautiful gifts to ourselves. And then when we feel better, we do better in life.
Yeah.
And then we can create that ripple effect of just being the light in a world that, really needs some extra light right now and some extra kindness and compassion. Yeah. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to explore with us, the life force of yoga, how can it benefit us? And your beautiful book sounds just amazing. And I'm going to get it pre-ordered tonight, and hopefully we can get some, get those Amazon rankings up there a little bit.
Thank you.
Because reading is another thing that can be just really therapeutic, because it can really just, take you outside of your stressful life a little bit and kind of adventure with the author and be in the novel and play and just experience life in a new and different way. One thing I'd like to ask you though, so, I mean, there's a lot of people that may feel like they have a book inside of them, but they haven't picked up the pen or, got on the computer or anything. So if you could give those folks out there or any kind of dream that they have this passion about, what advice would you give those folks to, take that first step to be able to move forward in that writing a book or becoming a speaker or, taking yoga to their coworkers or whatever it is, what kind of golden nugget would you like to give tonight?
Well, what I would say is if you haven't begun, there's a part of you that's either afraid, a fear part, or it could be a belief about yourself that no longer is valid, but maybe was valid when you were 7 and somebody told you that. So I would say do a dialogue with the part, try to see if you can identify, okay, I really have this passion to do this. What's holding me back? What are the parts that are holding me back? And do a dialogue with them and say, I understand that you're here to protect me. And so come from a place of compassion, from a place of understanding and curiosity. What is it that you need from me to feel safe enough to allow me to start this project that I really want to start? And then, then maybe give yourself a schedule, says, okay, for 5 minutes a day, I am going to work on this 10 minutes a day. That's all I'm going to give it 10 minutes a day and see what evolves from it. But usually if we have part of us really wants to write that book or paint that painting or take yoga into the world in a way that serves others, and we're not doing it, there's a part of us that we need to explore and with love. And I think doing yoga practice, unlike say something like a shamanic session, and I believe in shamanic sessions, I've had them myself, but yoga is much more subtle. It slowly helps us work through some of those defenses without even a story attached. It's kind of like peeling the onion slowly, whereas it's not like, yanking the heart open. So if you do a yoga practice, clear your space, remove the constrictions, and then from that place of compassion for yourself, ask those parts, those legitimate parts that probably have served you in some ways, kept you safe.
Right.
You know what, what do they need to allow you the freedom to move forward with what your passion is?
Yeah, that's very powerful, because there is always something that's and we could never start, so just find that stumbling block within yourself that you can move out of the way and create that path, because I believe that all of us that are here tonight are the answer to someone's prayers. And so that's what kind of keeps me going every day. And for myself, I know everybody's different. I want to each day discover what is blocking me, because I know that someone needs me to show up today as my authentic, true, best self.
Yeah.
And so for me, that keeps me going. For others, it's going to be something different.
Yeah. And I never assume that I have everything I need. I ask.
Yes.
And I mean, even before we started, we did a little mudra, and
Yes.
I ask for the wisdom, the compassion, the clarity, the joy, the humor of my teachers to flow through me. And then what I bring to the table, I've got my personality that's going to show up, but I want it, I want to be clear enough so that truth, flows through, and I can be, I can serve. So, and when I do my practice, I stand outside and I ask, for clarity to flow through me, ask for love, ease right now, in this, where we are right now, a lot of ease for ourselves and for those communities that we serve, and expanding those communities is important to me too. More diversity, more inclusion in those communities.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot more all of us can do at the end of the day. So we step up, do our part. And yes, I ask for that guidance, and because I'm tired of doing it on my own. I did that way for way too many years, being the independent, self-reliant military girl. I don't need anybody's help. No, it's okay. That is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of true compassion, that no, I'm going to ask every day for guidance and that wisdom, and to know what is mine to do. So
that's beautiful. So and that former military gives you the drive and the left brain and the order. And it's like, it's a beautiful balance, having both that and your yoga practice and your spiritual practice in all its forms.
Right. Well, Amy, I thank you so much for spending almost 45 minutes with us tonight, and blessing us with your presence and the gifts that you have to offer the world, and your new exciting novel that's coming out. So you guys can find her on our website. I'll put the little banner back up there again, so you'll know how to pre-order. But go to her website, reach out, contact her, YouTube, and just explore all the amazing things she has to offer, and share this with your friends. If you found some value in it and you think could be helpful to your circle of friends, share the video. I'll have the podcast out in a couple of days that Amy will have. So if you want just the audio version, we'll have that available to you. So I appreciate everyone for being here tonight, whether you're live or replay or catching the audio version. And that's all I have. Amy, do you have any closing words for us?
No, just just right hand to your heart, left hand on top, and say something kind to yourself, just the way you would to a small animal in your care or a little child. Say it to yourself. It starts right here. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much.
Thank you.